I was digging 50 wells, quitting too soon, and never hitting water. If I'd just chosen one place and stayed with it, dug deeper, committed, worked harder, I would have saved time, effort, and eventually reached what I was looking for. That image stayed with me. It settled in quietly and followed me through years of decisions, endings, and beginnings. Every time I moved on from something, a role, a path, a direction, the same thought would rise. You didn't dig long enough. If you'd just stayed, this would have been the one. For a long time, I believed that story. I kept returning to it, trying to make sense of why my discipline seemed to work so cleanly for other people and felt so unnatural to me. I assumed my curiosity was a delay, my sampling a prelude, and my movement a sign that I hadn't chosen yet. I thought depth was something that came later, after you stopped exploring and finally settled in. But no matter how many times I replayed that metaphor, I never hit water. What I couldn't see then and can now is that the metaphor itself was wrong. I was never digging wells. I was reading the land. I was paying attention to terrain, to subtle shifts, to the feel of the ground beneath my feet. I entered things fully, staying long enough to understand their structure, their culture, their limits. And when the truth of that place stopped changing, my body knew it was time to move on. That movement wasn't avoidance, it was accuracy. Sampling for me was never shallow. It was how I learned. I didn't skim the surface of things. I immersed myself long enough to know what something really was, and just as importantly, what it wasn't. Some people find water by drilling straight down. Some people find it by understanding how water moves across the land. Over time, years, decades, that way of learning becomes its own depth, a wider lens, a lived familiarity with many systems instead of the mastery of one, a way of recognizing patterns that repeat beneath different forms. But because we tend to measure success by staying, my movement came to mean something else. Leaving looked like failure, curiosity like distraction, sampling looked like a lack of commitment instead of a method of discernment. So I learned to doubt myself. I stayed longer than I should have sometimes, digging where my body already knew the ground was dry. I tried to become someone who could endure what didn't nourish me. I confused discipline with overriding my perception and success with ignoring the moment when truth finally finished speaking. That cost me more than leaving ever did. What I understand now is this: sampling is how some of us learn the shape of reality, not by claiming territory, but by walking it, not by owning one place, but by knowing many well enough to recognize what is essential. Depth doesn't always come from going down. Sometimes it comes from seeing across. My life isn't a series of abandoned attempts. It's a map, a record of where truth lived for a while and where it stopped. A landscape learned through experience, not possession. When I leave, it isn't impulsive. It's because the learning has completed. Staying past that point wouldn't deepen anything. It would only dull me. What looked like quitting is actually completion without self-betrayal. I am not someone who failed to commit. I am someone who couldn't pretend water was where it wasn't. And that distinction matters because I am not here to build monuments to discipline. I am here to stay honest with what is real. And that, finally, feels like water.